It's Friday, so let's answer some questions from the listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, currently where I'm doing the show right now and one of my breaks throughout the day. So since I'll be leaving to go out of town for Thanksgiving week, wanted to make sure that I got this Mailbag Friday in before I hit the road. And as for our schedule next week, I'm still planning on doing some episodes. I don't know exactly when they would be. Might just be a usual schedule of Monday through Friday, depending on what news is happening. But also maybe I would miss a day or two just because it's Thanksgiving. But again, usually a Monday through Friday slate, and our Fridays are always dedicated to a Mailbag Friday. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, where new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, not as many questions to get to, but we do have a few that have been posed to us on Twitter, a few that have been posed on YouTube. So we'll kick things off with a question from Elizabeth on Twitter asking about if I was going to do a segment on the MVP race. I'll probably plan for that sometime next week, mainly breaking down some of the numbers. The reason I didn't do one this week was actually because I finished up my Thursday episode right as they came out with the MVP awards. And then Fridays are always going to be Mailbag Fridays. Not really going to change on that unless there was earth-shattering news that happened and we had to push back Mailbag Friday to another day. But I always thought that Aaron Judge was going to be the unanimous winner. It was always a battle for second place. Bobby got all 30 second place votes, that is. But this question asked from Elizabeth, or it might have been also from Brent, be interesting to know how many guys have been a Gold Glove and won the batting title and not been named MVP. And the two closest things I got to was Alex Rodriguez won the batting title in 1996 as a 20-year-old, where he hit 358. He was an all-star Silver Slug winner, won the batting title, and finished second in MVP voting, but didn't win the Gold Glove that year. And then I also saw with Mookie Betts that he won the batting title in 2018. He was a Gold Glove winner and a Silver Slugger, but he did win the MVP that year. So I'm still doing some digging on that, but those were the two closest that I got to among shortstops. So for Bobby Witt Jr., kind of in a league of his own, he put up a phenomenal year, but not to worry. I do think we will see not just one, but maybe a few MVP awards from Bobby Witt Jr. in his soon-to-be illustrious career. So good question there from both Elizabeth and Brent. Probably do a MVP segment sometime early next week if you guys want to know some of the numbers on it. The reason it wasn't too pressing for me today is because I think for a while now we knew that Aaron Judge was going to be the unanimous winner for the American League side, and really Shohei Ohtani was going to be a runaway winner on the National League side. Okay, the first question we're going to get to here on Twitter comes from, looks like Charles. Is re-signing Michael Lorenzen a must? I love the idea of bringing back Michael Lorenzen. I loved what I saw when he came over from Texas to Kansas City, and I think the market's going to be very affordable on him. I don't think he's going to get anything more than a one-year deal north of $8 or $9 million. I think it might be a little bit under that. And if the Royals choose to trade Brady Singer, which right now I would say it's above 50%. I think I was at 50-50 not too long ago. The more that we're hearing things come out, the more rumors that are swirling about, I think it's an above a 50% chance that Brady Singer is dealt somewhere for the Royals to get one of the bats they've been searching for this lineup. And if they do go that route, I think Michael Lorenzen is a perfect option to come in and be your number 4, number 5 starter. Maybe you want to spend more and give a 2-year deal somewhere else, but I do think Michael Lorenzen could come in and give you good value as a number 5 starter, and then Alec Marsh or Chris Bubich could be your number 4 starter, and you feel good about the top 3. So in terms of being a must, I say we can pump the brakes a little bit on that. until the Royals make a move trading away one of their rotation pieces. And once they do that, then I feel like Michael Lorenzen might be near the top of that list because of what he was able to give you when he was healthy, his connection to the coaching staff, his connection to his teammates. I think it would be a perfect reunion to do and a very affordable reunion to bring Michael Lorenzen back to Kansas City. So good question there from Charles. Kelby's question is, other than Jack Caglione, who are you most excited about from the most recent draft class, and who do you think reaches the big leagues team on the same timeline as Jack? So I think from this last draft class, the guy that I am second most excited about behind Jack Caglione is David Shields, a very young pitcher they took, I think, in the second round, left-handed arm. I think the stuff is really going to play well if the Royals develop him properly. I saw a little bit of Frank Mozzicato comparisons, and that may turn away some Royals fans because he hasn't progressed the same way we'd hope for as a first-round pick. But David Shields, to me, is that great type of young high school arm that you could mold into not just a good big league starter, a frontline starter. I think that the plus pitches he has are really going to play well, but he's not turning 18 here for a couple of months, I think. So you have a really young piece to work with here. And I put him on the same timeline with guys like Blake Walters and Hero Wyatt, two guys I'm also pretty high on in the Royals organization. But I don't know if he would, fast track it all. I don't think that even 3 years down the road as a 21-year-old, you're talking about him being in the big league rotation. So you can take your time there, but I think the stuff can play well if he is developed properly by the Royals minor league department. In terms of guys on the same trajectory as Jack Caglione, I think him and Carter Jensen are probably on the same track to get to the big leagues at the same time. I think Carter Jensen is about a year away, and if he does play really well this year, I could see him in the big leagues at the end of 2025. Same thing for Jack Caglione. But I'm pretty confident that if neither of these guys play in 2025, I think they're going to be in Kansas City pretty early on in 2026. Another good question there coming from Kelby. Israel asked thoughts on a possible trade for Cody Bellinger, especially since the Cubs are wanting to trade him. We talked about this a little bit in yesterday's episode, was a part of our second segment. So if you missed any of that, you can hear us talk in length about Cody Bellinger midway through our episode on Thursday. I'm just not for it. Not that I don't like Cody Bellinger, the player. I don't like the contract that comes with Cody Bellinger. North of $25 million this year with a $25 million player option next year. That would concern me. Not that Cody Bellinger couldn't come in and thrive here, but I don't think I would entertain that deal at all unless the Cubs were willing to eat a large chunk of that salary. And I'd imagine that's what a lot of teams are telling the Cubs is if we're going to make any form of move, if these talks are going to progress, we got to know that you're committing a large sum of this financially than just asking us to pay the $27 million on his contract for 2025. The problem with that, too, is if the Cubs are going to take on a large chunk of that salary, you're going to have to give up more in return. You might need to part ways with a top 5 prospect in your system. You might need to part ways with guys you really like at the big league level to get Cody Bellinger. And I just think there's better options out there. I think the Royals could get a cheaper and better bat in left or right field than paying $27.5 million for Cody Bellinger. And think about the worst case scenario for some teams out there. If you acquire Cody Bellinger and maybe the Cubs don't eat a large chunk of that salary and he doesn't play well or he's banged up, he's got that player option of $25 million. There is no need to opt out on that. He would take it, and then you're on the hook for another $25 million. So to me, as I said in the segment on Thursday, it's more so the name that excites you. I think the player and Cody Bellinger isn't really worth upwards of $25 to $27 million on your payroll. But not a bad idea. I know the Royals are casting a wide net and looking at a lot of different options out there for their corner outfield bat. Jonathan's question is thoughts on Wilyer Abreu of the Boston Red Sox. Seems like Boston is shopping him. What would it take to get him compared to Taylor Ward? This is one name that I like as a dark horse. And I guess it's really going to come down to what does Boston envision 2025 being? Because if they're trying to make plays for guys like Juan Soto, if they're trying to make plays for Max Fried, if they're trying to make plays for guys like Roki Sasaki, really trying to bolster that rotation, it makes me think that they are definitely going to be hanging on to some of their great pieces. And I think Wilyer Abreu is a great piece for the Boston Red Sox. When the Royals had both their series in Fenway and Kansas City, he was one of the guys that I highlighted leaving that series of, I can't wait to see where his career goes, because I thought he was very impressive in 2024. I mean, was a valuable defender. I thought for the most part, there was a lot to like with the bat. He's not a super prolific on base guy, but I think the bat speaks for itself. He had back-to-back years of an OPS plus well above the league average, 132 his rookie season, then 114 in 2024, but also in 2023, he barely played. I mean, he had less than 30 games under his belt. So you talk about being an incredibly young player. What I think would scare away Boston in trading him is that he's got a lot of years of control left. He's not a free agent until 2030. I do like the name a lot. He's a dark horse candidate, and if the Royals made a play for him, I think it would be a home run type of deal. Just not sold Boston would be willing to move on from him with as many years of control that he's got left there. But Wilyer Abreu, it's certainly a name to watch there. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we still got a few more questions to get to in this edition of Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in Gametime. I say this all the time, but even though baseball season is over, it does not mean that you have to stop looking for tickets out there to go to football games, basketball games, concerts, comedy shows. They got it all covered over at Gametime. It's the app that I use to buy all of my tickets. There's a lot of fun ones here locally around the Kansas City area, Kansas and Colorado. Deion Sanders coming to Arrowhead Stadium. That should be a fun one. I know there's still tickets out there on Gametime. Go have fun, tailgate, pick a good seat, and never have to worry about where you're getting your tickets from, because Gametime is going to have you covered. I always got my notifications on too when it comes to Gametime, so I know which bands are coming into town, which games have ticket prices that are dropping. Such a fun app to use. So here's what you need to do. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is Gametime. Next question on our list is going to come from No Name. If the Royals end up making a trade for someone like Taylor Ward, Jonathan India, or Alec Boehm, do you think that they would make a big splash and sign a top free agent, someone like Bregman or Santander? From what we gathered in Annie Rogers' newsletter, it seems like the Royals really love what the trade market is presenting them. It's not to say that they can't go make a splash in free agency, but with the news coming out late last night that the Royals were one of the small market teams that called about Juan Soto, I know it's a long shot, and it was stated in John Heyman's article that, they realized that financially it wasn't going to work. I don't think it's a bad thing they made that call, and here's what I mean by that. If the Royals were willing to give a call to Juan Soto, it wasn't for a prank. It's not like they just said, hey, I want to hear what you're going for on the free agent market, and then we'll just hang up the phone. I think that showed me that J.J. Picollo and John Sherman were wondering if there could be a deferral of money, like what Shohei Ohtani was able to do, where he's only worth $2 to $3 million on your payroll, and then all of that money is going to be backloaded on like the last year of his deal. Because Juan Soto is another guy that can make a lot of money through advertising and be just fine with a $2 to $3 million salary in 2025. But what that also told me, even though they weren't able to come to an agreement on that, because I'd imagine Juan Soto said, no, I want to be making the most money of anybody out there in baseball in 2025. It showed me that they're not going to be scared away by guys like Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander or guys that are going to want that big-time money in free agency. So if the Royals go out there and they trade a lot of resources to go get Taylor Ward or Jonathan India or someone like an Alec Boehm, well, they might not have enough resources to go out there and trade again to get another premier starting player. That, to me, would signify that we're going to try our luck through free agency at that point. And we're going to be willing to throw our weight around when it comes to the financial aspect of it. So I'm going to say yes on this. If they do make a trade for, let's say, Taylor Ward, they absolutely will be in the running to make another splash in free agency to add to this lineup. I think the Royals are going to be aggressive. As I'm doing this podcast this morning, I am gaining more and more confidence that this is going to be a very aggressive offseason for J.J. Picollo and the Kansas City Royals. Next question comes from Aiden. With the possibility that all of Brady Singer, Chris Bubich, and Alec Marsh all go, what do you think of the Royals signing Roki Sasaki to be their number 4 starter and then bringing back Michael Lorenzen to be the number 5? The interesting part about the Roki Sasaki deal is that I thought he was a shoo-in to go to the Dodgers. I thought that it was a foregone conclusion. The LA Dodgers were going to be the main team that landed at the top of the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes, and it would basically be a battle for who came close in second place. That's what I thought was going to be the overall theme with this. Now it seems like the Dodgers aren't going to be the team to make that splash signing with Roki Sasaki, and it's not going to be as expensive as, the Juan Soto deal out there or the Yoshinobu Yamamoto deal. So I think the Royals could be in the running for it. And hell, I mean, if they were willing to give a call to Juan Soto, somebody I didn't even think they would dial the first number with, I think there's a chance they could go out there and at least see what it would take, what it would cost. But I also will say this. J.J. Picollo feels pretty good about the starting pitching depth. And I think it's more likely if they move a Brady Singer and Alec Marsh or a Brady Singer and Chris Bubich, that re-signing Michael Lorenzen and then having an Alec Marsh or Chris Bubich be the number 4 starter, or Daniel Lynch for that matter, seems more likely. I don't see the Royals being one of those teams in the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes as much as I would like it. I don't hate the idea. You talk about adding to an already great rotation in the American League. That may put you over the top as having the best rotation in all of the American League ahead of Seattle, who, of course, had it last year, in my opinion. So I do not hate the idea. I think that this will be something that we certainly evaluate throughout the winter meetings. I think it came out last night, or maybe it was this morning, that Sasaki's not looking to sign with anybody until mid-January. So there's still time to let things play out there. But I do not hate it at all. I think that it would be something worth throwing your hat in the ring for. But there's other teams that I think are better fits, one being the Boston Red Sox, who we talked about in the first segment of today's show. Next question comes from RB Carr. How much money would the Cubs have to eat before the Royals would realistically consider acquiring Bellinger? I think it would have to get under $20 million to the Royals' payroll. So if it's $27.5 million, I think I would need the Cubs to eat north of $8 million. I think if you eat anywhere from $8 to $10 million, I could start hearing out some offers for what it would take to, get Cody Bellinger at that point. Because if the Cubs say, hey, we're going to be eating $8 to $9 million with this, then we are going to be wanting some top prospects from it. Maybe they want a big league ball player. I mean, the Cubs are somebody that I don't view as a selling team. I think the Cubs, the last handful of years, have tried to reconstruct their roster in a few different ways. But looking to trade Cody Bellinger, it to me felt like they were sending out some feelers. And if they could get somebody to jump the gun, they've been wanting Cody Bellinger for a while. They didn't think the Cubs were going to be looking to trade him. Now they've got that opportunity. The Royals, the Cubs might be looking for somebody to be desperate enough to take on, 20 to 22 million of that contract. And they're all right taking on, 5 million or 6 million of that deal. But if you do get them to take on 8 to 9 to 10 million, you might have to part ways with a Carter Jensen or a Blake Walters for that matter. Or maybe they're looking at Brady Singer and Chris Bubich. And then that would be good enough to eat the 8 or 9 million, and the Royals get Cody Bellinger from that. I'm not sold on what the Cubs are planning to do right now, because Cody Bellinger is a key piece of that lineup. He's loved there in Chicago. He didn't have a bad year at all last year. So if they're looking to move him, I don't see it as them trying to go full sell mode. I think it's more so of roster construction. They're trying to free up some of their payroll. Maybe they could make another splash free agent signing. That's what I want to see play out a little bit. But to your question, RB Carr, I do think that this is a type of team that'll stay away from Cody Bellinger, and the Cubs are a type of team that wouldn't be willing to eat that much of the contract, in my opinion. I think the idea of trading Cody Bellinger is for a team to take on a large sum of that contract, even if it meant the Cubs are not going to get the best return that they thought would be possible. This feels more so about a salary dump than anything, in my opinion. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap up the last couple questions we have right here on a Mailbag Friday. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor in FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. For my pick, I'm going to go for the Missouri game on Saturday against Mississippi State. I'll take the over on receiving yards for Luther Burden, who is sure to be a top pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Last couple questions we're going to get to here on a Mailbag Friday, and then might actually end the show talking a little bit about the Juan Soto news, and maybe by the end of this Mailbag Friday, we'll get some breaking news about the non-tender deadline. And the next question we do have does apply to the non-tender deadline. Any arbitration-eligible players that the Royals don't offer? I think they would try to get everybody back to an extent. A couple of the non-tender candidates that I know the Royals will be looking at and having to make a decision on. I mean, you got Carlos Hernandez. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the guys that's dealt today because of Steven Cruz, to me, I think is the better version of Carlos Hernandez. And I think you got to pick one or the other because of how crowded the bullpen would be. So Steven Cruz, to me, is somebody that I do think is going to be picked over Carlos Hernandez, and Hernandez is going to be somebody that could be moved. I'm very curious if they would be looking to move somebody like Drew Waters or Nick Pratto. I think I said this in an episode last week or the week before that Drew Waters makes sense to have back just as outfield depth. The Royals had a couple injuries out there last year. He's a good defender. He can be a fourth outfielder. It doesn't make sense to me just to let him go or look to move him unless somebody really likes Drew Waters and is able to give you some form of value today for the non-tender deadline. When it comes to Nick Pratto, I have a harder time believing that Nick Pratto makes sense to keep around because of the first base depth in the organization, because of what Nick Pratto has shown since debuting in Kansas City. It wouldn't surprise me if he's somebody they don't really work out a deal with, but they might still be hopeful that they figured out some things. A strong offseason can have him give him a chance to compete in spring training. But, those are names they're going to have to make a decision on. Also, another one would be like a Jonathan Bolin. I think Jonathan Bolin, to me, is another guy they'll have to make a decision on. What do they view with him? Because he's a 27, 28-year-old prospect. He only appeared in Kansas City once, and that was in April of last year. In Toronto, made a start, and it didn't go that well. He does have good stuff, and I think it could play in the bullpen, but you're talking about a 27, 28-year-old prospect that's had some season-ending injuries before. He might be somebody you need to make another decision on. So those are some of the names I think you got to keep watch of today. But as for somebody they just wouldn't offer a deal to, those are kind of the names that come to mind. I'm also fascinated to see if the Royals would make a play on anybody that is planning to be non-tender by another team. We saw last year the Braves were going to be non-tendering Kyle Wright, and the Royals decided to make a move and go get Kyle Wright. It was the Braves as well about to non-tender Nick Anderson, and the Royals went out there and made a play for Nick Anderson. So there's certainly going to be guys out there that are available. Curious if the Royals will be linked to any of those guys. Next question. This one's actually our final one, so we're going to end it talking a little bit about the Juan Soto news and John Heyman's article. Blaze asked, what would you think about trading for Devin Williams? I think if it's affordable, him and Ursig paired up would be amazing. No doubt about that. I think having Devin Williams, I was about to say Daniel Williams. Daniel Jones got released today by the Giants, so that's where my mind is at with work. But to me, Devin Williams was available last offseason, and the Brewers decided to hang on to him. He does have that Josh Hader trajectory where the Brewers have an elite closer. They tend to let them play out their prime years in Milwaukee, and then just when they think they've got somebody good enough to take over, they're going to move that player. So I think it's likelier Devin Williams gets moved this go around in 2025. But what it would take, I'm not sure the Royals have. And when it comes to bullpen pieces, I just have not gotten this sense that the Royals are going to be a team to add a elite level reliever to that bullpen. They like what Lucas Ursig has. They think Hunter Harvey's going to be able to bounce back when healthy. They're going to have John Schreiber, Sam Long back, James MacArthur back, Steven Cruz might make a play for this bullpen. Daniel Lynch is certainly going to make a play for this bullpen. And when J.J. McCullough talked about the bullpen, he brought up depth, right? They're looking for depth. They want to have a number of guys that can battle it out in spring training, guys that can be cheap, affordable. That's what you need for the bullpen. And I just think the Brewers, if they're going to unload Devin Williams, one of the game's best closers, they're going to be asking for a lot. And that's something I don't think J.J. Picollo is going to be willing to do, even as sexy as it sounds to have Lucas Ursig and Devin Williams in the back end of the bullpen. That would maybe be the best 1-2 punch in all of baseball, or at least has the ceiling of being the best 1-2 punch of all of baseball. But the more we hear about Hunter Harvey and Hunter Harvey being that type of guy that can fill in the setup role, if they hang on to Chris Bubich and he doesn't cut it as a starter, he's somebody else they could really like at the back end of the bullpen. But to me, I do feel like Devin Williams is not really in the Royals' price range. And if they are to go after an elite level bullpen guy, I think they would like their chances in free agency more so than trading with the Milwaukee Brewers. So good question there from Blaze, and good questions from everybody today. Not as many to go over, but it does leave us a few minutes here, about a minute and a half, to talk about the Juan Soto situation, just to circle back around to that, because I have been asked a few times since that broke about, what was the point of this when they were never going to come close to matching that price. I think it was to see the deferral money part of it, if Juan Soto be willing to do that. And when he didn't, or isn't willing to, the Royals said, okay, well, it's not going to work for us. But I do believe there's positives to this. And I do want to also say this. As much as I praise J.J. Picollo and John Sherman for the work, you don't need to go above and beyond for praising a GM just for asking about a guy, because we've seen so many teams out there throw their hat in the ring. Hey, they're interested in this guy. They're linked to this guy. They're going to make a push for this guy. And if you don't get it done, well, it's a moot point. You didn't get it done. That's why last year there was more pressure on the front office with all this smoke around Marcus Stroman and Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, and the Royals got it done. They backed up what they said they were going to do, and they went out there and made some moves to bring in talent for the rotation. There's been a lot of smoke so far before the winter meetings about bats they want. Juan Soto just being mentioned in this crazy 2 weeks of the Royals liking Taylor Ward, Alec Boehm, Jonathan India. It shows you how wide of a net they're casting. And when you have that wide net of casting, you are going to land a few of those players, in my opinion. I would love to know the entire list. We're likely not going to know that. In fact, the Royals will probably make a move for a guy that we're not even talking about. We haven't even mentioned on a podcast episode. But I do like the idea of just saying, hey, we were willing to make a phone call. And even though we don't deserve praises for that or flowers just for picking up the phone, because anybody can do that, the Oakland A's can do that and call about Juan Soto and then do the same thing the Royals did. Hang up the phone and say it's not going to work. But even having Juan Soto on the radar and giving him that phone call makes me think they're not scared away by any of these other contracts that guys may be going for. Because to me, it's Juan Soto. Then there's a huge drop-off for what players will be going for salary-wise. And the Royals will probably be able to match any one of those deals that will be given to the top players in free agency. But Juan Soto, of course, is in a league of his own. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, go to Locked On MLB, where baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're going to be off the next couple of days, but should be back Monday or Tuesday. It could be a little bit different because of the holiday week. I'll definitely let everybody know what the schedule will be around then. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.